Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with both Robin Dunbar and Brandon Smith from Grid Metals. Let's start by congratulating you both on your joint venture with Agnico Eagle. Robin, would you like to start by explaining how this deal came to being and give us some updates on this stellar partnership?
Yeah, so I think through our corporate development activities, we became aware of potential interest from a number of different partners in the cesium market. And there was, a number of months of discussion that led up to an initial investment from, Agnico, which was on a confidential basis. And then as our relationship developed, the idea of a joint venture evolved. And, the way it ended up, we were, thrilled because normally with a extremely large company and a small company like us, it's difficult for the smaller party to maintain a majority interest in the project. And for, I'd say reasons, corporate reasons that, appealed to, Avenir that, and I just threw that name in, but that's the critical metal subsidiary of Agnico, who's the actual investor. They felt that it was a good structure for us to take the lead on operating the project and continue what we were doing with their, collaboration and support. So right now it's a small project, but both parties, I think, are certainly hoping that it's going to grow. Maybe I'll ask Brandon to just walk through the particulars of the transaction and how it was structured.
Yeah, thanks, Robin, and thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so what we did was last October, we had an unnamed strategic come into the story for 9.9% of Grid, and that was, as Robin mentioned, Agnico, which is now Avenir, the sub of Agnico. And what we've done on this joint venture agreement is they'll get 15% of the Falcon West Cesium project in southeast Manitoba for 3.75 million Canadian. And then on a resource, which we hope to have out in the fall of this year, they can move their 9.9% equity position to 19.99, so coming for another 10%. And then on a PEA or mine plan, which we expect, at some point early to mid next year, they can come in for another 15% of the Falcon West project. And so why we structure it that way is, the CapEx for kind of what we're looking at in the mining space is relatively very, very small. We're not talking hundreds of millions of dollars for CapEx. The one peer out there focused on a pure play cesium name has mentioned their CapEx is 7 million Canadian for their project in Ontario. So, it's going to be a small number. So what we've done with those stages of funding at key milestones is that hopefully can get us effectively financed to production for our cesium project, because the big risk in minor metals is that, it's very hard sometimes to market these and to finance them properly, but now we have a world-class partner who can help us get to production and ensure that we can get into production and get the best possible price for the product we're going to produce.
Congratulations on getting such a substantial partner, non-dilutive financing, all getting behind the Falcon West project. And let's talk about the Falcon West project for those of you out there that are new to this project. It is a world-class project. Perhaps you can explain some of the most competitive reasons on why this is so exciting. And the thing that really jumps out to me is how fast you can actually secure revenue from this project.
Yeah, cesium has a number of really unique, qualities to it in a cesium project of the type that we're undertaking. So it's extremely rare. So there's only been a small number of occurrences globally ever found. And what you're looking for cesium is the mineral pollucite, which occurs in pegmatites. So this pollucite can contain up to 40% cesium, and finding that anywhere in the world in fractionated pegmatites is extremely rare. So we have an occurrence of that, which is sitting about 500 meters off the Trans-Canada Highway, about an hour and a bit outside Winnipeg. and it is comes almost right to surface. And the deepest part that we're contemplating mining is about 40 meters. So it's a flat line, so it'll be a fairly small, shallow open pit operation, but very high grade. So what the other incredible feature of it is that to produce a saleable product, which is really a concentrate, you mine the rock and you crush it, and the technology of ore sorting is very well established now in Canada by the Tanko mine and replicated by others. And what this involves is crushing the rock to about 2 inch, like a gravel you might see in somebody's driveway, and then that goes through the ore sorter, and one pile spits out cesium between 15 and 20%, and the other pile is your waste stream. And that 15 to 20% cesium product is a saleable product. That's the feedstock for the cesium chemical industry, and it's extremely high grade. And so that product is extremely rare. So right now, we think there's, everything we see is a real shortage of new supplies of cesium in polysite hosted. And so, that is a tremendous opportunity. And in terms of the permitting process, we still obviously have many, hurdles and activities to complete as a part of that. But because you're not putting in major infrastructure and you're not using water in the process, it's more akin to permitting a quarry versus a mine. So again, it's very small cap for the ore sorter and the crusher and the pads and some trailers, a little bit of site infrastructure, and then your operation is a quarry style, and ours will be a relatively short mine life, because it's in terms of tons, it's quite small, but again, it's extremely high grade material. So, we want to, that would be the first new cesium operation globally in years. And, our goal is to get that in production as soon as possible and get some product to market, and then look for more and, try to expand our position in the cesium market.
So, Brendan, do you want to add any of the milestones that you're going to be charging forward to in getting Falcon West to the next level?
Yeah, sure. So the big one is the maiden resource, and we expect that in the fall of this year. So, a few months away is the target. And then in tandem with that, we are doing some met work, which you need to do obviously to get, a kind of a bulk sample to get concentrate to potential off-takers, and as the permitting side of it too. So that'll kind of all be kicked off in tandem now that Avenir has come in with this investment. And then obviously the last kind of big one would be a PEA or mine plan kind of at some point next year. So those are the big ones. But in terms of the pod that we've identified, which in our view is globally significant, we are going to look for more as well. So within that area, there's still some targets that we have to test. So the goal would be to also be drilling some exploration drilling this winter as well. So that could be a big driver of the stock as well if we're on to another pod, or we've identified some new areas to test. So yeah, a lot to happen the next little bit here. And then as Robin mentioned on the permitting, we are targeting permitting in relatively short order in the mining space, because there is no tailings, there is no fixed infrastructure. It's basically like a quarry type permit, and we are 500 meters off the Trans-Canada, about an hour and 20 minutes east of Winnipeg.
And of course, Robin, we really appreciate you previously done a Critical Minerals Institute masterclass on this very forward-facing but not well-known critical mineral cesium. You were talking earlier during Investor Talk about a new application I did not know about, which was the solar industry. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's been a big research push in the U.S. Into a new generation of solar panels, which are perovskite or tandem solar panels, and both of those applications use cesium in the process, and that they can significantly increase solar efficiency. And it's the largest U.S. solar company, First Solar, is investing heavily in that, and those are just starting to be commercialized now. And cesium is the element that you add to that is, really helps with the stability. So I think one of the drawbacks for that technology right now is there's not readily available sources of cesium, and so we think that market has some scope to grow. It's a very important market. And that's one of the kind of the key growth applications for cesium in the future. And again, very important because the Chinese really dominate the traditional solar panel market manufacturing and solar panels and supply chains associated with it. So a new opportunity for the solar industry in the Western world would be a real opportunity. And right now, if you look at the cesium market, it is 85% controlled by Sinomine, a Chinese company. They operate the Tanko mine not too far from where we are in Manitoba, and Bakita in Africa. And so if whoever has a supply of cesium has the ability to develop these new generation solar panels, and there could be other uses. It's not 100% exclusive, but I think right now all the research and application points to cesium being the best additive for stability in these solar panels. So I think it's a real opportunity.
We've discussed previously what a world-class team that you've put together, Robin. And of course, you also have more than just this flagship project, which everyone's talking about right now. Can you touch on some of the other projects that Grid has in your corral?
In the base metal side, also in southeast Manitoba, because we've concentrated there where we have our on-the-ground geological team. We have a joint venture with Teck Resources, with their funding exploration drilling for nickel, and we're looking for an Eagle's Nest type deposit there, very viable type deposits, and we hope to be drilling on that this fall. We're operating that as well. Our team is led by Dave Peck, who's a very experienced nickel geologist. He's worked all over the world. And Dave leads up our exploration team of geologists and on-the-ground guys in Manitoba, southeast Manitoba. We also have a joint venture with Boliden in the Thompson East area, which is just east of the Thompson Nickel Belt. Boliden, for those of you not familiar, it's a Swedish multinational integrated base metal producer and smelter operator in Europe, and they, like Canada, as an exploration jurisdiction, and Manitoba in particular as having potential. So we just signed a deal for them, and on both the Teck and Boliden, we act as project operators, and for the joint venture formed with Avenir as well. And what this does is it does bring in some revenues and cash payments, and pays for our staff, so that we can do a fair amount of grassroots exploration and very efficient exploration as opposed to using contractors. And it really offsets our revenue corporately. So we're able to have like, for example, someone of Brandon's caliber, running the corporate development. Brandon was previously a mining analyst at Cormark, and so being able to have some offset to those costs enables us to put together a first class kind of development team. And so we're always looking to balance the scale between our the cost of running a business and having good people on staff, because these type of opportunities don't just fall out of the sky. You have to work really hard at them. So yeah, that's we think our base metal opportunities have tremendous scope. We also have a lithium deposit, which we have plans for, and yeah, we think that these other projects will have their day. But right now we think the cesium is kind of the closest opportunity to revenue generation, which we think would be a great thing for the company.
Brandon, I have had the privilege of hearing you speak before. Is there a question or a point you'd like to make about Grid Metals that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Tracy. I guess one of the big ones is, sometimes when you put out news like the Avenir joint venture agreement, some people, there's a bit of misinformation or people just assume things about it. But I think the one big thing we've structured with Avenir, which I think is very kind of unique in the minor metal space, is that, we funded it, we've structured it where we can get funding at key milestones to get us into production without, hopefully incremental capital needed. So that really gives us the maximum upside on realizing the highest price for the cesium concentrate that we're going to produce out of the Falcon West project, which sometimes in minor metals, if the markets go south, then you can't really finance at a great price. An offtaker can come in and kind of scoop the offtake for below market price. So the fact that we've structured this in a way that hopefully eliminates that risk is, in my view, one of the best parts of this deal. And obviously, you're bringing in a world-class partner like Avenir, which is a sub of Agnico. So, just the way we structure, I think I always try to hammer that home for investors when they ask, because it's sometimes it's a bit unique to structure a deal that way and for the company to maintain the majority of the economics. So we're still going to have 70% interest in the project. Normally, if you do something like that, you're going to end up with 20% or something. So we still have the economics and we've structured it that way. So I think that's the big point I try to get across to people.
Again, congratulations on your Falcon West project deal announcement. And for those of you interested in finding out more about Grid Metals, please go to the following website. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Brandon.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Tracy.
Tracy.